This is a 2008 Volkswagen Passat. And it's got a problem with the antifreeze leak in the front of it. I know the general leak area is around the thermostat housing or related pipes going into it. I'm going to take the clamp off this air cleaner tube. I suppose it's really got something going on here. Not sure what that's all about. Air pipe running everywhere. But anyway, I'm going to take this clamp loose. And there's a T30 Torx screw mounting it there and on the bottom. And these clamps are 7mm. There's a clamp on the other end of the pipe. It's got another Torx bit down here and a clamp here. Might even take that auxiliary water pump loose. It's got like the 12 spine bolt holding it on. Get all that out of the way and then throw a little pressure on it. Somebody's been putting green antifreeze in it instead of the purple stuff that's supposed to be in it. A G12++. Take this other Torx bit out and clamp loose and get that air pipe out of the way. I'll put some pressure on the system. Haven't found the leak just yet. I'll take some more stuff loose again. Antifreeze is coming from somewhere. I'm going to take this mess here loose. Takes a T30 Torx bit. 2 of them. See if I can get a better look down in there. Looks like start moving stuff out of the way. Something going to town up there. That was the thermostat housing. That's the block free. It looks like the water pump, it was replaced a year ago. Supposedly it was a dealership one. So to get into there, took his throttle body loose. Got 4 of these T30 Torx bits, bolts holding it in. That kind of opened the hole up. I'm going to leave this plugged in just in case that thing has memory. It's not going to be in the way, so don't end up corrupting something. I did finally spot where it's leaking. It's leaking at the top of that plastic tube right behind that blue tube. Either the seal's bad or the housing's cracked. I'm going to start taking this hose off, and then this one's going into that water pump housing. It's got a, looks like a 10mm bolt holding it. And a Torx bit holding it. And I think this intake, aluminum intake support mount is going to have to be moved out of the way. those 12 point real fine swine bolts mixed in there too. $12mm, 12 points. I got the two lower hoses off, and that bypass hose got the Y in it. Just slip these wires back. U-shaped wires on these slits right there. Just slide them up. Just wiggle the hoses off there. The wires sit in them slots right there. Now I'm loosening the pump bolts, but I took this little belt cover off. Had a couple Torx bits holding it. One straight and one sideways. To loosen the pump up. I couldn't get that coolant temperature sensor unplugged. This coolant sensor, I just took and squeezed these ears and just pulled the whole thing out of there. It's also got a nipple on that oil cooler onto the pump housing. It'll have to be fed off of that forward when it drops down and get this belt off of it. I unplugged that green connector. Stuff the wire back up out of the way. That's the cover that goes over the belt. It's on the end of it. Took those 5 bolts out of the water pump. 3 of the same size and 2 of the same size. Those 2 I took out around the coolant temperature sensor. I got the pump down and slipped the belt off of it. And right there on top of that tube is where the antifreeze was sizzling out right across the top there. So the pump's dislodged and ready to pick out of there. This is a bolt hose. 5, 2, 3, 4, and 5 around the coolant temperature sensor. 2 short ones. All 3 of these are the same size, and this is a heater pipe, I guess. This water pump's supposed to be only a year old. Have to get a new housing. I'm going to make something to get this sprocket off. I want to go ahead and change this belt. It's got 90,000 on it. That's a 12mm 6-point. Grounding a 12mm 1/4-inch socket down in the back. I'll waller this hole out so it barely fits this. I'm going to stick it in the press and press it through it. This socket's just about the right height to fit in that Volkswagen. It's probably that much. Needs to be shorter by about an 1/8 inch. I ground that socket down and welded it to this steel bar. That did it. That broke it loose. I took and stuck a screwdriver in against the flywheel underneath. and held it. The motor from turning. There's like lots of holes with the flywheel sticking out. Broke it loose. This has left-hand threads, so you need to lift up on it to loosen it. And supposed to replace this bolt. I think it's kind of soft. And that's how the belt comes off, which is ridiculous, but it kind of reminds me, it's just wedged on there. Kind of reminds me of a generator. This shield faces toward the transmission, so of course it's kind of obvious with that bevel. The shaft's beveled too. I'm going to go ahead and change this belt and replace this bolt. Left hand threads. Went ahead and flushed that green antifreeze out of the car while the pump was off. This is a new pump and housing. Comes with a coolant sensor and a thermostat. Water pump. I was looking at the old piece where it's busted out. And they have intentionally put a cut in that outer housing. Why, I don't know. That's the only structure that holds that seal in. That's like an intentional weakening of it. I don't know if that failure was due to that or what. I'm going to cut that nipple off and put an adhesive bridge across that. And that'll slow that up. Let's see what happens. Rough that area up with the edge of a razor blade so I can prepare it for some epoxy across that opening. Bond that, make it one piece again. That ought to help it out. Once it sets up, I'll bridge that gap. I'll put a layer on the side of the seal. We'll see if it lasts more than a year this time. I went ahead and took a razor blade and skinned the surface off of these dowel pin holes inside of them, because it's kind of tricky putting it on there. I test fitted it and it seems like it's hanging up on the dowel pins. They're kind of rusty in there. It would hang up on one side or the other putting it on there, and it could potentially hold the housing up while you're tightening it down, crack it or put stress on places. So you could probably take a smaller drill bit, as long as you watch your seal and don't hurt it. You might remove it before, if you decide to patch this cut the factory made in that. Get your seal out of the way and just kind of clean them up, just a fraction, not too much, and just enough to make it slide over them dowel pins without getting hung up. I'll probably put some type of thin oil in there or something to help that slide on them dowel pins. New belt and a new bolt to go inside of this drive gear, and I usually replace this piece that goes in the oil cooler on the engine. Nipple, 2 O-rings on it, which get lubricated with some antifreeze. This protective cap needs to be removed before it's installed. This bolt's going to torque to 10 Newton meters plus a quarter turn. So I just put a 10 Newton meters on it. I'm going to use this precision torque wrench to put the 10 Newton meters on there. I finished my toe, a way to torque it down to Newton meters it needs to be. That's the gear with the bolt in it. That's something else to get to. Getting that bolt started down there can be aggravating. It is left threads or turn it loosened to tighten it. I got the bolt started, then slipped the belt on the loose pulley. Seemed to be the best way to do it. While that bolt's loose on the drive pulley, be ahead to go ahead and mount the water pump while you got slack in the belt to slide it up on the water pump, and then tighten your bolt down. These O-rings need lubricated with antifreeze and stuck in the pump housing and then fed into that when the pump goes up in there, and tilt it down and get this belt up on it. Now that bolt's loose on the balance shaft sprocket. I just kind of fed it on these fins. Just kind of walk it over. I get the dowel pins lined up. I lubed those O-rings before it went on the oil cooler. be careful of the dowel pins and put your hand back there and feel that housing on the corners and make sure it settles on them before putting the bolts to it too hard. Skinning those dowel pin holes with a razor blade worked good. They slid right on them. Make sure that this goes flat against the block. And reach over top of the coolant temperature sensor back here and feel the seam. Make sure it's flat against the block, and it is. Now tighten the bolts down. One down at 1 here, 2, 3, and 4, and then 5 up here. I'm going to replenish the Loctite that was on these bolts. I don't know if that's factory or somebody did that, but that's not a bad idea, I guess. They only torque to 9 Newton meters. I've tightened that bolt to 10 Newton meters and then put a quarter turn marks on it from noon till 9 o'clock. This is what I'm using to hold the motor from turning. There's access to the flywheel there, and I just put a 2x4 underneath the radiator support and a jack under it on the end of a big screwdriver. Yeah, I kind of run out of room. I'll just move the motor back a little bit. Pick this piece up, reset it a little bit. Everything's in its respectable place. And go ahead and put that cover back on the belt. Put the pipes back in, plug the coolant temperature sensor in. Test it for leaks. Put the throttle body back on.